I know that's a bit of an abrupt way to end an episode, but I'm going to do it quickly like that every time. Every episode's gonna hopefully be around 20 minutes-ish. I'm switching my graffiti out just to get some variance before we go into the next level, which is Love Trap. I mean, you have options for doing other levels, but I'm just gonna do Love Trap now with gum anyway. However, as will become the norm with a lot of levels, before we get into it, I'm going to show the graffiti in this area, which is Park Street. First graffiti we have is a small size, Watch Out by Anti-Tag at number 13. Next up, we have this little gem, Hazy Days by Haze at number 16. You're gonna see the name Haze a lot in this graffiti. Next up is a large size, Home of the Brave by Melting Pot at number 47. Here he is again, Haze Amaze by Haze at number 50. Now we move on to size extra large, You to Bomb by Bomb Master at number 80. Followed by Mix It Up by Sound Crush at number 81. And lastly, we have Pray for Rain by Bebos at number 83. Could also be pronounced Bebozu, as you can see in the art. Alright, we're moving up in the world, moving to a little bit of a bigger level.
Get to Park Street. All officers respond.
I didn't mention it last time, but Onishima is going to be a recurring thing in the game. This radio in the bottom will give you a warning of what enemies are going to be in the area. Like I said last time, enemies are only triggered after the radio event, and after that, you have to complete one red arrow graffiti. We see green arrow graffiti here, which is entirely optional and not required to complete levels. To complete levels in Jet Set Radio, you have to spray down fully every red arrow graffiti in a level. At that point, the level will end. There are a few exceptions, but for the main story missions, that will always be the case. Park Street is a bit of a bigger level. I don't think it's the biggest in the game, but we are moving up, and we will continue moving through larger and larger levels and levels of increasing difficulty. This guy is Onishima, who I didn't mention last time. He's not as weak as the police. He's got a gun, but you can spray him, which temporarily immobilizes him. If you can get behind him, you can't spray him from the front. However, in some versions, it's easier to spray him than others because bumping into him will cause him to stop, let you get behind him, and then spray him, which is always amusing because he has a temper tantrum when you do. This level also has motorcycle units, which are just dudes on motorcycles that will literally run over you with their bike, and a SWAT team that deploys tear gas, which is not very fun. We're going up against a rival gang called the Love Shockers, which Professor K illustrated in some of the earlier cutscenes, which I gotta admit, I like the cutscenes quite a bit, but for most of my playthroughs I end up skipping them because I've played the game so many times. It's good that you can skip them. Not every game gives you that option, and it's very frustrating for replayability. I think I just tried to get on top of one of those buses, which sounds like a ridiculous thing to do. You actually need to do it. This graffiti soul, not super hard to get if you can position your grind well. There are some graffiti souls in this level that are really annoying to get. There are about 3 in the entire game that I really hate getting, and 2 of them are in the first 2 levels. The first graffiti soul in this game that I hate getting is the one that requires you to go on top of a car. The one that I hate in this level requires you to go on top of a bus. And there's one later that requires you to go on top of a van. It's not fun to jump onto moving objects that you can't see, and believe it or not, the PC version of this game / the next-gen version, digital version, is actually the easiest to do this on. Every other version is way harder, because this game was originally a Dreamcast game, and then later in like 2011 or 2012, got ported to PC, PS3, and Xbox 360. This is one of the hardest graffiti souls to get in the game, in my opinion, because you have to time your jump onto a moving object when you can't see it. So part of the problem with the enemies in this game is that they're very, very intelligent. No. With these particular enemies, the SWAT team, they can attack you from a distance, which makes it harder to tell when you're really safe from their attacks. They're manageable, but getting attacked can be annoying because it slows you down. And also does damage, of course. That's why you have a health bar. As we get further into the game, more and more enemies will show up at varying degrees of difficulty, but for the most part, if you know what you're doing, you can fairly easily ignore most of them. Most. So this level, more than the first one, has some large sprays. They're going to significantly contribute to whatever rank you get if you have a high graffiti stat. If you're choosing a character like Tab, or technically even Beat, that doesn't have as high a graffiti stat and you want to get the jet ranking, you're gonna have to find some places where you can do trick combos. This spot right here, with the stairs that are bridges, overpass I guess, is pretty good. It's pretty good if you can get around this pole, because you can just loop your grinds into each other, which gives you a score multiplier, which is the main way you would get points if you were scoring. But I find it's faster, more enjoyable, and easier to do it with graffiti. That being said, you won't always be able to rely on just a graffiti score to get a jet rank in a level, which I highly recommend. There is a fairly valuable reason I'm doing it, and it is mandatory if you're doing an 100% playthrough. Now, of course, 100%ing a game isn't mandatory. No one's forcing you to, I hope. But I think this game's worth, like, seeing as much of it as you can, because it seems like such a simple game on the surface, but has a surprising amount going on. Like, I used to be of the belief that this game was very much style over substance, but the more I play it, the more I end up seeing exactly what's there, and while it's not as maybe intricate or profound as Here It Comes Again, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Profound, yeah, okay. It's not as mechanically intricate when it comes to tricks as Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, but it does have its own stuff going on that makes it extremely fun. I find the graffiti spraying and just trying to beat the clock and escape enemies and explore these environments quite fun. Because I think that Sega and Smilebit did a really, really great job with this game in terms of environmental design, style, because I mean, I don't want to call it comic book, but it pops out at you. The visual style really pops out at you because the characters are cel-shaded and everything is just surprisingly good. And because of that, for a game that was on the Dreamcast in 2000, that's not really a technical marvel, it's aged excellently. I mean, obviously there's low resolution textures and there's some pop-in, but it's not a huge deal, and I think the game holds up incredibly well in most ways. There we go, we beat the level, and we more than surpassed the score requirements.
That's right.
We're gonna blast your blues with a burst of pure sound. This is your very own one-punch knockout broadcaster, Jet Set Radio. Which one of you punks want to step in the ring? Shibuya Cho got some bloodletters in the walls from them lonely lovers, but they were erased before Mama could see them. But now they've gone away somewhere. Were they just flirting to have some fun, or is this some new game they're playing?
We're gonna move straight, well, almost straight into the next level. I'm gonna switch out my graffiti, as I will in most levels, and then we'll move into the next level, which is going to be Benten Boogie. Just a disclaimer before we actually show the graffiti, this area of Benten Show by the wiki and some parts of the community is referred to as Chinatown, but I can't find anything in the game that supports this being the designation for this area in Benten Show that we're visiting. Nonetheless, I'm going to refer to it as Chinatown because that's the only thing I could get from, like, a wiki or whatever. first thing is a small graffiti, every other caption by EOC at number 24. Followed by a large-size graffiti, now by CCAT at number 56. And lastly, Interrobang by Interrobang at number 90. There's not a lot of graffiti in this level because it's a relatively small area, but it's a fun one nonetheless. Every area in this game, except one, every area except one in this game, I really like, and I will eventually get to the one that I don't like, for better or worse. But I think the game has great environmental design for both its mechanics and just aesthetically. So we're up against the noise tanks in this one because Benten is their turf. I'll talk more about that later, I think, because there's a few things that go on with that. But ultimately, if you're not paying attention to the story, the rival gangs aren't important, but if you're 100%ing the game like we're doing here, it can be helpful to know a little bit about them. The noise tanks are like, as Professor K, I think, will describe them eventually, man machines. Cyborgs, questionably. They just look like robots and spray with a not false. They spray with a mechanical arm, which I think is a really cool design choice. But ultimately, the rival gangs are not particularly involved. They won't spray over what you spray. They're just kind of there as like an objective and window dressing for the missions. They do play a role in part of the game, in a few parts of the game actually, but in terms of just like normally playing the game, they're kind of unimportant. What I do find interesting, however, is the contrast between the main areas of Tokyo, this game's fictional setting, and I have fictional in not air quotes, but like semi-transparent air quotes, because it's based off of Japanese cities, particularly Tokyo. Surprise, surprise. But each area which is conquered by a rival gang is different aesthetically and just varied in quite a lot of ways. We've seen Shibuya-cho, which 5 guesses what area of Japan that's based on. But it's referred to as the City of Daylight in cutscenes, and as such, every level is taking place during the day with a nice, like, midday sunshine feel to it. Benten, which is the noise tanks area of Tokyo, is always at night. You cannot play in this area during the day at all, and I think that's really cool because it highlights the neon lights and just a general, like, nightlife kind of atmosphere. Because every bit of the game feels different, and then you have another area which will come up in the next episode, which will be Kogane. I am pausing because I am, yes. So ordinarily I would cut away pauses, but this game's soundtrack I really want to show off in its entirety, and cutting away from that is not great. It will cause, later in the series, it'll cause some continuity issues, but I'll explain that when we get there. I'm making sure that everything in this game is at least in order, and that anything I show is going to be substantiated for an 100% playthrough at some point. Now, unfortunately, in this gameplay, which I'm not using for a Graffiti Soul collection guide, mind you, I said it last episode and I'll say it again here. Graffiti Souls, once we've finished an area or finished all graffiti, will have their own separate videos which will show you their locations and information, both numerically and by area. But until then, the only way you're gonna see where to find the Graffiti Souls in the levels is through these videos for now, which I don't actually recommend because you're gonna see them for like at most a minute or two when I really struggle to get them, and at worst you're gonna see them for like 2 seconds. But there will be videos of that later. So I don't think I mentioned that I switched to tabs graffiti. I'm trying to keep it to character graffiti for now, but that generally does not stick, and you'll see why as more characters are unlocked, because this game does have unlockable characters, and quite a few of them. Many of which you'll just get by playing the game, pretty much. What I find kind of interesting about unlockable characters is that you can just straight up refuse to have almost all of them join. I don't recommend this. I very much don't recommend this, even for just in any, like, non 100% playthrough. Because why would you give up the option? I think we might have seen it in the last mission in Love Trap or in Shibuya-cho, but there are also cinematic cams when you do certain tricks over certain spots. It's a little unusual and a little pace-breaking, to be honest, but sometimes it's cool, and I also like it because I'm pretty sure it gets rid of the UI, which makes for good screenshots. Hint, hint. I'll let you guess where I got the screenshots for some of the things from for thumbnails and whatnot. I stole them. No. So the last spray I did here was on top. I actually ignored it earlier because I knew I missed a graffiti soul that requires you to go on that rail. Now that we're done the level, I'm gonna shut up and let the cutscene play.
That's right.
Jet Set Radio! The GG Garage is just jumping with frogs. Ribbit, 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 ribbit. Wonder who did it? The noise tanks from Benten Cho. They won't eat anything without additives and chemicals. No veggies or fruit for them. They're into that Frankenstein food. They sell software to pay for their spray cans. Right on, brothers. Word is, last month's big blackout was their work. Look out. Get these guys mad and it's no cable for the kids.